At the end of the day, we truly just want to be seen, heard, understood, valued. That also includes these emotions, right? Our sadness, our grief. Hello, beautifuls. Welcome. My name is Giselle, co-host of the Strong Sunflowers podcast and founder of GS for Growth. And May is all about Mental Awareness Month. And I wanted to create a series where we talk about our emotions, our mental health, and learn more about it. This series is specifically created to, number one, create a safe space that people can actually talk about their mental health. Two, just help someone out there and make sure that they know that they're not alone so they feel less lonely. And three, educate. I just want for us to be more educated in our feelings and our emotions and how we feel. So this video is all about emotional intelligence, and we're gonna go dive in deeper into the definition of certain words that we use all the time, but giving them a more concise definition so we can apply them more in our lives. If that's something that you're interested in, make sure that you subscribe, and let's get right into the video. Before we continue, and if you're suffering from any of these mental health disorders, please make sure that you talk to someone, talk to a friend, make sure that you talk to a professional and get the help that you need. But without further ado, let's jump right in. When I think about emotional intelligence, I definitely think about Brene Brown, Atlas of the Heart, and this video is gonna be focused basically all on her definitions of what our human emotions are from her research. And the way that she splits her book up is about places that we go to when, and then that's where she coupled her emotions. So first we're gonna start off with places that we go to when we feel uncertain. And I just did a video on this prior to this about the new trifecta and the new pandemic that is plaguing our society right now, which is depression, anxiety, and loneliness. And all three of these together are in this loop of just sadness and despair, and people are just really unhappy. And the way that I did that video as well was focusing on the definition of the word. For example, anxiety, what does it mean? A mental health condition characterized by excessive worry, fear, or nervousness. And one thing that popped up the most for me was fear. Like, what are we afraid of? You know, a lot of the times that's where we get our anxious attachments as well. We are afraid that these people are gonna leave us, that we're gonna be alone. And it definitely takes a lot of different aspects of our lives to put together. Being self-aware, being okay with our presence, being okay with being alone with ourselves and our thoughts. A lot of us haven't battled or faced our demons, and we have just been running away from it, and that causes anxiety, knowing that we have to face them. And really, when I think of anxiety now, I think of fear, and a lot of different types of fear, you know, fear of the unknown, fear of what you don't know, fear of the outcome, that things might go to shit. One of the simplest definitions that I've found was from Alex Hormozi. And Alex Hormozi definition of anxiety is having too many options. So the way that we combat that is by having more priorities. And I think also anxiety is when we think about the future and what could be, you know? And sometimes we have this anxiety of things that like literally 1 in a million. So I think when we talk about our priorities, right, we also need to talk about like the real outcomes, the real possible outcomes that can happen. Because sometimes we go like way too extreme and like outliers, and we don't focus what like reality could be. Okay, if I quit my job, hey, I might find another job. There's a lot of people hiring. Do I have the skills? Yes. But if I focus on like, oh my gosh, if I quit my job, I'm never gonna find another job, it's not realistic. Because if you put in the work and you have the skills, you can find another job. And one of the things that they talk about in Atlas of the Heart is that anxiety and excitement are both the same feeling, even though we say one is a good thing, which is excitement, and one is a bad thing, which is anxiety. Like both don't feel very well. Both give you like that excessive heart rate. Both give you those clammy palms. Both give you those butterflies in your stomach, and you feel like you might throw up. Both excitement and anxiety do that for us. And I think also being here on YouTube and putting yourself out there and being vulnerable can also cause some sort of anxiety of like how people take your content. And I think the word vulnerability here ties in really well. And Atlas of the Heart, vulnerability is the emotion that we experience during times of uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. Woo! GS for Growth is all about being authentically you, and with authenticity comes vulnerability. And I know that there's levels to this. I say that we shouldn't share all of our lives on social media because people need to earn that part of us. But there are some parts that we can share and be vulnerable with if it brings value. And I think when I think of vulnerability, I do think of that emotional exposure because literally that's what I do here all the time, especially when I'm trying to grow with you guys, teach you the lessons or let you know about the lessons that I've learned throughout this journey, and also at the same time the lessons that I'm learning now, like in due time. And knowing that when I share those opinions or life lessons that I've learned or stories, I may get criticism, I might get judgment. You know, it's a very vulnerable space to be here on YouTube, and I applaud creators that still stand their ground and show up authentically in this platform. But I think because I've done the work and I've worked on myself and gone through therapy, and I feel strong enough to show up as who I am, take it or leave it, and I take every criticism as a grain of salt, and I also take every compliment as a grain of salt because I'm here to do what I want to do respectfully. I just think of that one person that my content might help or is helping, and it really drives me to do better, to do more of it, no matter what the judgment or criticism I might be getting. In a quote, Brene Brown says, "Vulnerability is not weakness. It is our greatest measure of courage." Because we feel belonging only if we have the courage to share our most authentic selves with people. Our sense of belonging can never be greater than our level of self-acceptance. It is so important for us to love ourselves and accept ourselves in this space of uncertainty. Because if we are not comfortable with who we are and our abilities and our capabilities, then that doesn't allow us to show up authentically in those spaces. Next, Brene goes into places that we go to when we compare or fall short. And this was really interesting because she talked about shame and guilt. And even though sometimes you use these words interchangeably, shame and guilt are totally two different things. When we feel shame, it usually comes from within. It usually has to do with us, like I am bad. It's very internal. But when we feel guilt, it's usually an external thing. We feel guilty for doing things that might have been misaligned with our values. Shame is saying that I am bad, while guilt is saying I did something bad. And I think that great differentiality is really important because I think as human beings, we're all capable of doing something that we're not proud of. And I think that's where the guilt comes from. But I feel like at our core, we are good people, you know, and for the most part, we are not bad. And after those two words, she also talked about humiliation. Like, what does humiliation even mean when we feel humiliated? And she talked about humiliation being feeling unworthy of oneself and feeling disgusted. But the difference between humiliation and shame is that in shame, again, we feel like we are bad and we internalize it. With humiliation, we are still feeling all these things of unworthiness and that we are bad, but we feel like we don't deserve it. And another place that we go to when we compare and fall short is definitely comparison. And comparison is not even an emotion, it's a compilation of a lot of different emotions. So comparison is a crush of conformity from one side and competition from the other. It's trying to simultaneously fit in and stand out. Comparison says, be like everyone, but better. And I feel like, again, when we go into this place of compare and falling short, two definitely emotions pop up at us, which is envy and jealousy. And I feel like for the longest time, I use these interchangeably. And when I think of envy, it's like you're envious of someone, right? You want what they want. And jealousy, I thought of it as you're jealous of what they have. The way that Atlas of the Heart explains both of those are, envy occurs when we want something that another person has. Jealousy is when we fear losing a relationship or a valued part of a relationship that we already have. So that made me think, because the way that I was interpreting has been different this whole time, according to the research. So what popped out to me from that definition is that envy is basically wanting something that someone else has, and then jealousy is like you already have something but you're afraid to lose it. So you're not envious of your friend, you're jealous of your friend because they're hanging out with X, Y, and Z and they didn't invite you. So you're afraid to lose that connection with your friend because you feel like you're out of the loop. For the longest time, I thought it was jealousy, but now knowing the definition between the two, right, I believe it's envy, when we want what others want. And I think the best way to combat this and not let it be a thing in your life is I focus so much on me. And this is gonna sound bad at the moment, but hear me out. I really don't give a fuck what everybody is doing. I am so focused on what I have going on that it doesn't even cross my mind to be envious of whatever X, Y, and Z someone has, because I know that I'm capable. And again, it goes back to us being capable in our own capabilities. Like, I know I have the drive, I have the skills, I have the go-getterness, I have the hustle to really accomplish the things that I want to accomplish in life. So what I do is I literally focus on me. I gotta choose me, I gotta pick me, I gotta love me. I gotta literally hone down, be obsessed with me. And again, there's levels to this, don't go overboard. But what I've noticed in my own personal life is that the more that I have time to focus on me, the less time I have to be envious of someone else. That leads to actually being truly happy for my friends that are exceeding in life and not having so much of that comparison of like, oh my gosh, like they're doing better than me. Who the fuck cares? Not I. That's not what I'm focused on. I'm focused on what I have going on to push me forward. And I truly feel like when you pour into your own cup, the more that you can pour into others. But if your cup is empty, I think that when the cup is empty, that's where you can really be envious of what other people have because you wish you had it for yourself. But at the end of the day, like, we can have those things for ourselves if we put in the work to have it. I recently posted a video and one of the people commented on it and it said, oh, you're so selfish. It's all you. And I replied, I was like, you cannot pour from an empty cup. I don't care what lies people have been telling you about. You have to be selfless. Not over here, baby. Not at G is for growth. You're gonna be freaking ruthless with choosing you. Again, until your cup is filled enough that you can pour it into others. I truly feel like when I'm not taking care of myself and I'm forced to take care of someone else, it's hard for me to do it out of love and have gratitude for doing something good, even though it's something good, because I haven't been doing that something good for myself. The more that I take care of me, the more that I love me, the more that I give myself what I need, I literally feel myself overflowing. So I have mental space, mental capacity, and the emotional intelligence and the emotional space to be able to deal with other people's lives and emotions and what they have going on and just truly be happy for them. So you gotta put you first. Always. The next part that she talks about is the place that we go with when we are hurting. And tied into that, I feel like a lot of the times when we are hurting is because 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 of our needs are not being met. And some of the emotions that we feel in this place of hurt is depression. One of the definitions, the simplest definitions that I found for depression was from Alex Hormozi. And he said depression is the lack of options. And I feel like when we don't have options in our lives, we can really get down on ourselves because that usually means that we are not aligned with our goals and our core and what we want for our lives. When I look back and notice the times that I was depressed, I can see like, ooh, I was totally depressed during like the last half of my marriage because 1, I didn't want to be there and I didn't know how to get out. So I felt like I didn't have any options, right? I didn't know how to communicate my feelings effectively. And again, I felt like I had no options. I felt like anger. I felt like God wasn't there for me. There was a lot of feelings. And looking back at the definitions that we just looked at, I definitely felt like there was a lot of shame and guilt, a little mixture of both, because I did feel shame that God had given me this marriage and, you know, marriage is supposed to be forever. And I also felt this guilt of like, but it's not me. Like, it was hard. And I think when it comes to depression, like I talked on the other video that I just did, is the trifecta of depression is the lack of wanting to do anything fun. You feel sad. You just want to be left alone. You have no interest of doing anything. And then this leads to anxiety in some sort of way because you don't want to message your friend that you've been ghosting for like 2 months, right? And then it leads to loneliness because you've done it for so long, you pushed it off for so long, and you feel so alone because you have no friends, because you haven't reached out, because you're anxious to reach out, because you've been depressed. So it's like this cycle, this ongoing cycle of these emotions that we feel. For me personally, when I think of sadness, if I can simplify it in one definition, is when things don't go your way. And for me especially, if I speak about a time, I think about my divorce. There was a sadness there because 19-year-old Giselle had this like goal, this vision of like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna get married in the temple. I grew up Mormon as part of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I had this like dream in my mind of, oh my gosh, I'm gonna get married to the love of my life. We're gonna be together forever and all of eternity. I got married in 19. It was very fairy tale. We started dating. We got engaged 5 months in. We got married at our 1 year anniversary. I had these dreams and visions of what it was supposed to look like, and then it all came crashing down and it didn't happen. So I think sadness is definitely sometimes when things don't go our way. And it's sad because we have to like bury our goals and our dreams that came with that vision that we had for our lives. Even though on Atlas of the Heart, she doesn't have a specific definition of sadness, she has 4 things that it's worth knowing that she learned from the research. Number 1, sadness and depression are not the same. Sadness is sometimes referred as depressed mood. However, sadness is common but not an essential feature of clinical depression. So you can be sad and not necessarily be depressed. And you can be depressed and not necessarily be sad. Sadness and grief are not the same thing. Although sadness is one part of grief, grief involves in a whole group of emotions and experiences. And we're gonna go touch a little bit about grief because grief, I think, is a cumulation of all these different sadness, depression, loss, heartache, all of these emotions all happening all at once. Number 3, there are positive aspects to sadness. And in her own research, she states, my research has taught me that acknowledging and naming our own sadness is critical in the formation of compassion and empathy. So yes, there are some positive aspects of sadness, like the people that have suffered through great trauma and great sadness in their life, they tend to be, according to the research, they tend to be more empathetic. They tend to be more kind, more tender, just because they know how hard life can be. And they felt those emotions before. And like, again, some things you just don't wish on your worst enemy. And I think grief and other different types of emotions are one of them. And number 4, there's a reason we love sad movies. And if you're anything like me, I love me a good sad movie. People like being moved. She states, we like to be moved. We like to feel connected to what it means to be human, to be reminded of our inextricable connections to one another. Sadness moves the individual us to a collective us. One of the quotes that she said is, in our saddest moments, we want to be held by or feel connected to someone who has known that same ache, even if what caused it is completely different. We don't want our sadness overlooked or diminished by someone who can't tolerate what we're feeling because they're unwilling or unable to own their own sadness. And I think being able to own our own sadness is very important when it goes to the next level, right? Grief. And in her book, she talks about grief as being this multiple longitude of things. Grief is often thought of a process that includes many emotions rather than singular emotions. And some of them are loss. While death and separation are tangible losses associated with grief, some of the participants describe losses that are most difficult to identify or describe. They include the loss of normality, the loss of what could be, the loss of what we thought we knew or understood about something or someone. They also go into longing. Related to loss is longing. Longing is not conscious wanting. It's an involuntary yearning for wholeness, for understanding, for meaning, for opportunity to regain or even simply touch what we've lost. Longing is a vital and important part of grief. Yet, many of us feel we need to keep our longing to ourselves, for fear we will be misunderstood, perceived as engaging in magical, unrealistic thinking, or lacking in fortitude and resilience. Another aspect of grief that she talks about is feeling lost. Grief requires us to reorient every part of our physical, emotional, and social worlds. When we imagine need to do this, most of us picture the painful struggle to adjust to a tangible change, and such as someone dying or moving away. But this is a very limited view of grief. The more difficult it is for us to articulate our experiences of loss, longing, and feeling lost to the people around us, the more disconnected and alone we feel. Talking about grief is difficult in a world that wants us to get over it, or a community that is quickly to pathologize grief. She goes further into grief and talks about the center of complicated grief. And there's sections to this, right? There's always levels. There's acute grief, which occurs in the initial period after loss. There's integrated grief, the result of adaptation to the loss. Like when we lose someone, and especially when I think of people that have lost their partners, their soulmates, their life partners, and they have this family that they have to kind of adapt to the loss, adapt that your dad's not here anymore, that the person that I turn to for literally everything and anything is not here anymore. Yeah. When I see stories like that, it literally shatters me, because even thinking about it is heartbreaking. It's complicated, right? There's complicated grief. Occurs when something interferes with adaptation. When this happens, acute grief can persist for very long periods of time. A person with complicated grief feels intense emotional pain. They can't stop feeling that their loved one might somehow reappear, and they don't see a pathway forward. When my grandfather passed away, I remembered I would still pass by his house, and sometimes it wouldn't click that he's gone. And I'll be like, oh my gosh, I gotta call my grandpa. And I would have to remind myself, like, Giselle, your grandpa is not here anymore. Your grandpa's dead. And it was, again, it's hard to put into feelings when we have that kind of grief. And I feel like when we feel grief, it's really us wanting to share our life with that other person and not being able to. There's just certain moments in life that you really wish the person you love would be there. And for some of us, they're not here anymore. So at the end of the day, we truly just want to be seen, heard, understood, valued. That also includes these emotions, right? Our sadness, our grief. And I think this can also lead us to a place where things are not what they seem. And this place has even other emotions, right? Anger, for example. You can feel frustrated, angry, resentful of whatever it is. I got very lucky because after my great grandmother passed away, I made it very important to make sure that I connected on a deeper level with my grandfather every time we spoke. And my last words to him were, I love you. Because we would always end with, I love you, when we hanged up the phone. And when he passed away, I didn't really have any anger, any resentment, because I had loved that man the most I could love him when I could love him. So I didn't have any regrets. And I think that's something that I cherish and I try to apply in all the relationships in my life. Even when I'm like angry and feeling all these emotions, I'm like, okay, if this person dies tomorrow, how would I feel? And if I would feel shitty that I didn't call them today to tell them that I fucking love them, even if I'm not happy with them, then I still gotta do it. Another emotions that we feel also is like bittersweet, right? Because even with my grandfather, like he suffered from Parkinson's. So when he passed away, there was a relief. Like he's not hurting anymore. He is in a better place, as I like to believe. But it's a bittersweet feeling because there's still that sadness and that grief of like, I wish he was here. And even though it's small, it's still there because these are still people that we would love to do life with. Bittersweet is a mixed feeling of happiness and sadness. And no, I wouldn't say I was happy that my grandfather passed away. I think I would say that I was relief that he didn't have to suffer anymore. A quote from Mark Parent says, "The bittersweet side of appreciating life's most precious moments is the unbearable awareness that those moments are passing." And back to that definition of bittersweet, experiencing happiness and sadness all at once, I would definitely say that that was me and my divorce. My divorce for me was bittersweet because there was still a lot of love there, but it wasn't the kind of love that I needed. I felt like I married my best friend instead of a person that I wanted as my husband and my life partner. So those two, just those differentiations alone was hard to put into words. And then already being married to this person that is a good person, that deserves love and compassion and all these things, and not being able to give it to them, it was definitely sad for me because, again, things didn't go my way or the plan that we had for each other. And then there was also that happiness in there because I had options and I could breathe and I can really build a life that I wanted for myself, which is what I'm doing right now. And I think even from that experience, the next chapter is places that we go when our heart is open. I was very adamant about being able to still keep an open heart because I am a lover girl at heart. I still believe in love and being in love and just living a life with someone that you want to be your life partner and spend eternity with. I still believe in the fairy tale, and I really wanted to make sure that even after my divorce, I didn't feel like that wasn't a possibility for me. I wanted to still believe in love, and I still wanted to believe that someone can fall in love with me and that it can work out. And when it comes to love, I think it says here, we cultivate love when we allow our most vulnerable and powerful selves to be deeply seen and known. And when we honor the spiritual connection that grows from that offering with trust, respect, kindness, and affection. Love is not something we give or get. It is something that we nurture and grow. A connection that we can cultivate between two people only when it exists within each one of them. We can love others only as much as we love ourselves. Shame, blame, and disrespect, betrayal, and the withholding of affection damages the roots from which love grows. Love can survive these injuries only if they're acknowledged, healed, and rare. And I think even in my marriage and even in my 4-year situationship, there was a lot of that. I think there was a lot of blame, a lot of disrespect. A lot of guilt. And I think in my marriage, there was definitely a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, a lot of disrespect at times that created those roots to wither away because there wasn't that trust. And again, like she said, these injuries can only survive if they're acknowledged, healed, and rare. And it got to a point that they weren't rare. And it got to a point that we just didn't see eye to eye and could acknowledge each other's pain just because that's not where we were supposed to be. So it's funny how when she talks about the brokenhearted, and it says that they are the bravest amongst us because they dare to love. And I regret nothing. I don't regret my marriage. I learned so much. And even in my 4-year situationship, I don't regret that either because I learned so much too. When it came to heartbreak, and when we think of heartbreak, it's like, oh my gosh, someone broke my heart. And the researcher says, I learned that heartbreak is more than just a painful type of disappointment or failure. It hurts in a different way because the heartbreak is always connected to love and belonging. And one of the definitions here, it says, heartbreak is what happens when love is lost. And I think for the longest time with my situationship, it was hard for me because now looking at this definition of heartbreak, it was never a heartbreak in a sense because there was never any love lost. Because I still love him to pieces. I would do anything for that man. Almost anything, I should say. But there's still definitely a lot of love there. There's a lot of love. So when I think of even that relationship, I'm trying to pinpoint my feelings, right? So I'm not heartbroken because there's not any love lost. The love is still there, and I think that's what makes it harder, and that's what has made it harder to walk away. When we talk about love, we add a lot of things into that. And one of the things that we talk about in this section, when we open our hearts, the place that we go to when we open our hearts is trust. And I think with love comes trust. And she has a couple of things here. And love is boundaries. You respect my boundaries, and when you're not clear about what's okay and not okay, you ask. You're willing to say no. Reliability. You do what you say and you do it. Like my partner, like even though we were never in an official relationship, our partnership, like I could count on him for anything, and he knew that he could count on me for anything. And we really literally acted like a married couple because we literally had each other's back. Accountability, we owned our mistakes and apologized and made amends like right then and there. Vault, you don't share information or experience that are not yours to share. We definitely protected each other's secrets, and we're able to be just vulnerable with our life experiences with each other. Integrity, you chose courage over comfort. Every time we would get out of our comfort zones and learn from each other and just be like, hey, like I didn't like this, or vice versa. We were non-judgmental. We created a space that we could talk to each other. We had generosity with one another. Whenever I would see that he needed something from me or I needed something from him, there was just all of these different things that included in this love and this chemistry and this bond that we created with one another. And when we go to the next feeling or emotion, it's betrayal. And I think because I still wake up to this day sometimes and I'm like, I can't believe he did that to me. Like, I cannot believe that happened. I'm shooketh. Still shooketh to this day. And it was like 2 years ago, more than 2 years ago. Still shooketh to my core. And the feeling is betrayal. Betrayal is so painful because at its core, it's a violation of trust. That's where I can pinpoint my emotion. I feel betrayed. I feel betrayed from a person that I gave so much trust and worthiness and just a little reliability and accountability, and we had all this trust. Specifically, I trusted you, and just how things went down, and just of what happened, I definitely felt betrayed. And till this day, I'm still like, oh my gosh. For the longest time, I just thought like, you broke my heart. And getting into this emotions, it's like, there's a quote that says, I'm not sure there's a braver sentence in the human catalog of brave sentences than my feelings are hurt. It's simple, vulnerable, and honest. Well, we don't say it very often. We get pissed off, or we hurt back, or we internalize the hurt until we believe we deserve it and that something is wrong with us. I definitely went through that spiral, but rarely do we say, this really hurt my feelings. And I felt betrayed, and that really hurt my feelings. Even 2 years later, and even though I forgave, I didn't forget. And it still haunts me sometimes. But we just have to be honest with ourselves. My feelings were hurt. Yeah, they were hurt. And even through all of that, I still believe it is better to have loved and lost than to have never loved at all. And now let's go into a place that we go to when we're feeling good. When we're feeling good, I feel like, of course, the emotions that pop out at us are joy and happiness. And joy is an intense feeling of deep spiritual connection, pleasure, and appreciation. And I think for me, I always have said that joy is like more long lasting. Happiness is like, this makes me happy in the moment. And I think joy is truly being happy or joyous with who you are, what you bring to the table, what God has for you, what the future holds, just complete joy of our life. When I think of joy, I think of contentment. I think of enough. And on here it says contentment is all about satisfaction. And happiness is expressed as feelings of pleasure often related to the immediate environment or current circumstances. So again, things that on the outside that bring you happiness, whether it's another trip, or you got a new bag, or you bought a new car, or your friends got to go to this amazing dinner, like that brings me happiness to be hanging out with my friends. But joy, joy, I think it's really a deeper, more connected emotion. And even having all of those emotions, it ties into, right, the places that we go when we feel good. Gratitude, thankfulness. I'm so feeling the feeling of gratitude. It's just like I have all these things that bring me happiness and joy in my life, and I'm so thankful. I'm so grateful. Gratitude is an emotion that reflects our deep appreciation for what we value, what brings meanings to our lives, and what makes us feel connected to ourselves and others. Like, oh, I have so much gratitude that I have people in my field that love me and support me and that want to support my goals and my dreams. I have so much gratitude for my health and my body, for being able to do the things that I love to do, like traveling, for my eyes to be able to see the views that I get to see, for my voice to be able to speak the words that I want to say and create this content. There's so much gratitude that comes into our life when we are feeling joy and content. So, and that can truly lead us to be more kind, more supportive, more generous, to not only with ourselves, because I have so much gratitude for me, but I have so much gratitude for all of you. So, I've had so much fun doing this little series of emotional intelligence and diving into our mental health and just learning. I have learned so much thus far too. I hope that this video has helped you guys in all ways, shape, and forms. I'm so thankful for you to be a part of my field. And if you enjoy this video, make sure you stick around, because on this one over here, we're gonna talk all about the 13 things mentally strong people don't do. So stick around. I love you guys, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Ciao.